nothing to if you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Think of Brian Bill Gates' face. There's nothing to Hello all. It's Patty from Natural Law Health. I hope you're all doing well today. I am with you all for my second live stream. Still getting the technology set up, but it is what it is. So today I did collect a few questions, and those questions were sent to me by people that just basically had health-related questions. Perhaps they had questions about anarchy. Well, I kind of looked over the questions, but I wanted to read them live with you all today. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit today about the healthcare system, and where do people that are not into virtue signaling and not into trying to appease the powers that should not be, where do we go for health care if we need it? What are our options? Because I was talking to a client about that, somebody that was curious about getting some mental health counseling. And where do you go for mental health counseling if you're going to find a virtue signaling counselor or therapist or psychologist that's just going to tell you, well, how dare you think that, this COVID is not real? How dare you think that, we're not suffering from a true, real threat? I mean, can't you look out your window and see the people dying left and right? I don't know. I mean, I don't see that. And it's funny, whenever I talk to people that believe that this thing is real, that it's not just a bad flu, whenever I talk to people like that. So yeah, where do people like us go for help if we need that? And maybe we just need to talk to somebody. I mean, I can definitely relate to the client I was talking to. It is very lonely. It is incredibly lonely when we feel like we're surrounded by people that believe this paradigm. Is paradigm the correct word? That believe the official story. And, it's not like we can question it when we're talking to people that believe. So there's belief and then there's truth, right? So how do we navigate those waters? Because in my understanding, when I kind of look at what's available, it seems like everybody's on board with this. I just look on Facebook to a lot of people that I'm friends with that I'm not necessarily friends with because we have anything in common, but people I went to grade school with, people I went to high school with, and they kind of all feel as if, this thing's real. And they're all getting injected, they're all, really on board with it. And here I am questioning what is in this injection. And I'm really gonna try to kind of be a little bit careful with my words. Currently, I have 2 strikes on my YouTube channel. And one more strike and I'm gone, right? I'm gone. And a lot of my natural health clients, they find me right now through YouTube. I have a backup channel, Odyssey and LBRY. And people just don't find me there. Most people, they just know YouTube. And I know there's a lot of people, especially older people, that want to get natural health consultations. And, the world of the internet, when I think about my parents, it's like, it's confusing. There's a lot out there. I mean, I'm pretty old and I'm confused by everything that's out there. I mean, I am pretty tech savvy in some regards because I do a lot of online teaching and all of that. But that's another thing I wanted to talk about with all y'all today. My kind of uncertain future and what's coming forth for me. But I do have some questions, people that emailed me So I'd like to read some of those questions. And by the way, for those of you that are new to who I am, right below here, you can see the name of my website. It is called Natural Law Health, all one word, naturallawhealth.com. Natural law is really just, the law of karma. And for those of you that are watching me on the One Great Work Network, you all know this, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be on the One Great Work Network. But for those of you that might not know about the One Great Work Network, I just posted this live stream on Facebook. Natural law is basically just karma. It's the law of the universe. And, a lot of the content creators on this channel, we all have kind of that same aligning principle in natural law. My perspective is that if we live according to the laws of nature, health-wise, we won't really be disturbed. Obviously, there are disturbances all of the time. Homeostasis, which is the maintenance of stable internal conditions, is ways in which our body reacts when we are put out of balance. Like if you walk outside naked and it's, 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside, your body has an internal mechanism to warm you up so that you don't go into hypothermia. That's homeostasis. And assuming that your body is healthy, you should be able to do that, right? You should be able to respond in that way so that your body can bring you back to a mid-level, a mid-range, a homeostatic range to keep you healthy, to keep you alive. And there are many things that we can do, day-to-day living activities and actions, right living, that will help those homeostatic mechanisms work appropriately. Wrong living, however, makes it more challenging for homeostasis to kick in. So, when you're eating a diet that's not the healthiest, let's say a lot of processed junk food, a lot of high-fat animal products, and animal products that are fried, processed. I'm talking like, salamis and hot dogs and all of that nonsense, junk food, high sugar, processed foods. That's not food that is going to be health promoting. And these types of foods, when we take them in day after day, our body doesn't metabolize them well. A lot of times we can't digest them, especially if they're manipulated with high pressure, heat, that denatures proteins, that coagulates a lot of the molecules so that they can't be broken down. And sometimes they get absorbed in an unnatural state, and then they become antigenic within our bodily fluids, within our blood, and then we release antibodies against these things. We have immune responses. And that's really true with the category of molecules called proteins. Everybody is under the impression that they need a lot of protein in their diet, and that is really just not the case. At least that's not what I have seen clinically. I have seen that protein is actually more dangerous than it is helpful. Our body, in its infinite wisdom, knows exactly what to do with the proteins we already have, and we really need very little protein for fuel. In fact, protein in the category of macromolecules, in the categories of the foods that we take in as part of our diet, protein comes in third place for energy. First is carbohydrate, then fat, and then protein. Protein does have, obviously, an importance. We need protein for, what do we need protein for? We need protein for a variety of reasons. Many of the worker molecules in our body are protein in nature, like the contractile proteins in our muscles, the structural proteins in our skin and in our bones, like collagen, keratin, hair. Keratin is in our hair as well, in our nails. Antibodies, I mentioned antibodies, those are proteins. Hormones are proteins like insulin, and then many enzymes are protein like trypsin and pepsin. I finished my semester earlier this week, so that's good. Currently I do teach at a college, and I'm a little concerned about my future at the college because I did receive a notification that all faculty must receive an injection if we want to teach without a mask on. So it's kind of like, how can they, there's so many unknowns. I think there's a lot of fear that's being used to push this propaganda. So like, one of the higher ups, the VPs, he put out this college-wide email that, anybody that plans on teaching in the fall on campus, if you haven't received the injection, then you have to wear a mask. So I would have to wear a mask if I were to talk in front of my students, up to 6 hours a day with a mask on. And I can't wear one. Mostly because I don't need to wear one, but I just physically, I have, some health issues and I cannot wear one. So I need to breathe. And so I'm trying to determine how all of this is going to play out. And there's just a lot of unknowns. It's a crazy time right now. It's truly crazy. I was listening to an astrologer that I like, and he was stating that, this upcoming, I think it's May 26th. Is that Wednesday? I think May 26th is Wednesday. When is May? It is Wednesday. So May 26th is an eclipse. It's a lunar eclipse. And he said something about like this certain type of moon. It's going to be pink or red. I don't know. But it's a time of change. And in his astrology report, he was discussing that we need to, revisit, and, he was much more eloquent than I'm being right now in describing all of this. But it was basically change and believing in ourselves and embracing for the change that's forthcoming, being safe, which I think, can be a crutch for many people. Safety is something I think I've struggled with. I have to support myself and my fur children. And, I'm there, and myself, I'm our sole provider, right? So I need to be able to feed them and to pay for shelter and all of that. And, I'm a little concerned. Can I do this without a full-time job? I don't know. I briefly mentioned it to my mom about, maybe doing something else, and it just like threw her off. So she didn't want to hear it, but she's very much, not wanting to rock the boat when it comes to these things. And she tells me that I shouldn't talk about these things online, right? So that's my family. And I know Mark Passio's talked a little bit about being able to discuss these issues with his mother, and she's kind of, I guess, somewhat come around, but my mom is very much of the belief that, don't rock the boat. I mean, she's okay with what I feel. I've explained to her the dangers of certain injections, and, I'm sharing with her that people are dying. I think one of the statistics I recently saw, and this is on the website of the World Health Organization, or one of those big CDC websites. But basically from adverse reactions, or basically from, I don't want to say the word, but basically from the injection, about 30 people a day are dying. 30 people a day. So is that the risk you want to take for something that doesn't seem to be that deadly? And like I said, the normies that I talk to, they all seem to think it is something we need to protect ourselves from, and we've got to protect the grandparents, and we've got to protect everybody. And I'm confused. I'm really scared for society, and it really kind of it's a different world we're stepping into, and there's a lot of unknowns. So before we talk about that, let me address some of these questions that came in. They were emailed to me. If anybody wants to email me, my email address is pattylager, PATTYLAGER, ND for a naturopathic doctor, at gmail.com. And basically on these Friday live streams, I will read your question and do my best to address it. I don't have, I may not have all of the answers, but I can do my best. So the first question came in from Mark. It was not Mark Passio. I think this was a Mark that might be taking one of my classes. And I do teach health classes. And I don't want to call them health classes. I do teach the basic sciences in a traditional college, but also I'm doing kind of my own thing as a backup, just for safety purposes, to make sure I do have income in case anything happens. But I do teach courses that will help students that want to become natural health consultants, naturopathic consultants. I work with Dr. Robert Morse, and he has a school, a naturopathic school that he's putting together with other educators like myself. And we're really excited about it. And it's going to be, you know, a way where we can learn the truth about keeping people healthy, which I like to talk about quite a bit. How is it that we can maintain, and as I was talking about earlier, homeostasis, making sure that it's easy for our body to respond to changes that occur within and around us all of the time. You know, adapting to those changes, when we can do that easily, that's really what health is. And that's going to allow us to experience this time we have on this planet. And that's what we're here to do, to experience life. Not to be slaves, not to be, not to sit in a cubicle for 40 hours a week and just listen to what our masters tell us to do and, pay our taxes and all of that. We're here for other means, for other reasons. So anyway, let me read some of these questions. Question number 1. I would really love to know how the ATP molecule was chemically found and how it is known, and if there is a mechanism to test for it. Well, I know what ATP is, adenosine triphosphate. I know, that it's the primary energy currency in the molecule. I don't have, the history of all of these molecules as far as how they're found. That is something I would say definitely look up. You can probably do a Google search or use a better, less, I don't think there's anything wrong with looking up ATP and its, history, but I would just look that up. It is the molecule, though, of energy. And wherever ATP goes in our cells, it transfers energy to allow for everything to occur in our body. So muscle contraction, digestion, thoughts, nervous system impulses traveling down axonal fibers in neurons, all of that requires ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So I'm sure Mark was asking that question because we were talking about that in my cell biology class that I'm teaching for natural health professionals. So very interesting question. I wish I knew the history of the molecule. I just unfortunately do not. So again, I apologize for not knowing all of the histories of these molecules. Let's move on to the next question. Let me see who this is a long question, but this is from Sam. And again, I will read this and then I will address it. My question pertains to what we have seen play out in 2020. I've been a long-time Passio listener, but my continued research into worldly dynamics, let me move this to a screen where it's not so crazy for me to read it. Make it a little bit bigger. All right, so I've been a long-time Passio listener, but my continued research into worldly dynamics we have seen has made me see things a bit differently. Natural law, of course, is the utmost importance. However, my current disconnect is with the idea that we will be able to reach people if we just continue to put content up and create our own media, as Passio suggests. Well, let's just stop there for a second, and we'll continue on, because I'm curious as to where this question is going. Again, I haven't pre-read any of these questions. I'm kind of reading them out for the first time. But, I will say one thing about putting content out. I mean, it is a means for sharing a different perspective with people. And I think, that's how personally I found this material. It was around 2010, 2011. I didn't know anarchy was a thing. I mean, I think I've heard it in, like, most normies. I thought anarchy meant chaos, that, people are going out into the street and breaking car windows. Now I understand because some content creator put out information about this. So, I do think, we're at a point where we do need to wake more people up. But, with that said, maybe you're suggesting that we do something above and beyond that. So let me continue reading your question. Prior to 2020 hitting, I was quite active online, applying the knowledge gained and trying to wake up the sleeping masses. Can't say I made a dent. It drained me completely, and my health took a bad turn because of it. I definitely can understand that. Going on, I still have not recuperated. I have come to understand that some people, maybe too many, simply will not be able to be woken up. Perhaps, yeah, I get that too. Going on. This I don't mean because they are too mind-controlled or indoctrinated, but more so because they simply are not humans. I know this sounds weird. I don't know if you are familiar with the work of Thomas Sheridan, pagan guy that discusses occult esoteric stuff on YouTube. Just as an aside, I am not familiar with Thomas Sheridan, but I definitely am intrigued, and I may look up his YouTube channel. Sounds interesting. Anyway, carrying on with Sam's question. He made one video where he discussed the very real possibility that too many people on this planet simply have no souls. And that would be the reason why they simply cannot feel that things are terribly wrong, and that they simply just do as they are told, and go along with whatever the tyrants of this world dictate. And no matter how much you try to awaken them, they simply will not listen. He made a pretty good argument to back this up, and if memory serves me right, he mentioned that all of these meat golems, and golems I think is a reference to Lord of the Rings, and I know Mark Pastio has used he's used golems before as the soulless human that just kind of desires and doesn't really, expand and whatnot. But anyway, he made I guess Mr. or Dr. or Tom Sheridan said that these were meat golems, for a lack of a better term. They had the consciousness of animals, specifically the unimaginable amount of animals sacrificed in slaughterhouses that reincarnated on this planet as humans because of the availability of babies being born. Out of control breeding, that is, having 12 of the 15 kids. This would explain sheer sheep-like conduct of these people. All right, so hopefully that wasn't too confusing because I interjected with a few of my own thoughts there. So you're saying that Thomas Sheridan was stating that there are many people without souls, and I don't know if it's Thomas Sheridan or you that are calling them meat golems, but that these individuals had the consciousness of animals, which, right there, I would, just pause, because I don't think we can say that a human that is believing this official story and willing to get injected and thinking that it's okay to cover up the breathing ability of their children and send them off to 8 hours of school. I don't know if that person could be equated to an animal who probably would not want, to cover up their mouth and would probably bite when a human would try to do that to them. So I don't know if that would be a good analogy, but, people equate humans with animals all of the time, and in many cases I put animals on a higher pedestal to those types of humans, and I've gotten a lot of flack for doing such things. I am a vegan, and I'm a vegan in the sense that I believe that animals need to be respected, and we do not need to be eating animals. And I know animals eat animals, but because we are higher beings, and those of us that are more conscious of this can see that animals suffer, we should not inflict undue suffering onto animals. When animals kill, they do it quick. Like when it was a couple of weeks ago, I let my dogs out and it was like 1 a.m. and one of them had to go to the bathroom, and I let all 3 of my dogs out, and a rabbit was out there, and I heard a quick little squeak, and they killed the rabbit. I think one of them just broke the neck, and then the animal was dead. Unlike what humans do when we eat meat, we stick a cow in a factory farm where they cannot move for their entire life. Many of those cows get raped so that we can use them as milk factories. And then we just kind of shock them with a gun to their head and kill them in a very painful way. And it's just a painful existence. It's a demoralizing existence. And so there's a big difference between humans that do that have no consciousness, and what animals do when they are aligned with nature. The way they kill and the way that humans kill animals for food that they do not need to eat, totally different. So I'll step back from that. I don't know if this has anything to do with what your question is, but I just felt like I needed to share that. And since my live stream is 2 hours long, I want to make sure I fill it up with content. So anyway, you're saying that these meat golems, you're saying they have the consciousness of animals, and that's where I just wanted to interject that little explanation. And that they reincarnated into these meat golem human bodies during a time when humans were procreating quite extensively, And I remember my mom and dad were part of that time period. My mom is one of 10 children. And so during that time, back in the 1950s, maybe late 40s, people were having a lot of kids. And I don't know if that was a bad thing. I don't know. So anyway, I don't know if that's what you're pertaining to, or maybe in some other cultures where having a lot of children is the thing to do. But you have to remember historically, in some cultures, children really helped the family survive. They helped to work and, those kind of things. So I don't like to judge that type of lifestyle is bad per se. But anyway, I don't want to interject too much with your question. I'm trying to be very unbiased. Perhaps I'm trying anyway. So let me go on to your question. So I guess the question is, do you think such a thing could be possible? I would think it is. I do not claim to know all of the intricate workings of the universe and how it is all intertwined, but such a possibility by virtue of it being possible, and he puts in quotes, infinite nature of the universe and whatnot, end quote, leads me to believe that this is what we are facing in this world. Perhaps it's a form of karma that we have to deal with such a situation on this planet. Well, I can see that, and he has more to his question, and I'm just kind of pausing here, trying to understand it as I read. I understand, like right now, 10 years ago, I kind of knew what the hell was going on, but 20 years ago, I did not. And I was kind of as much of a sheeple as anybody else, but I grew out of it. I became aware. And I believe I became more like I was when I was a child. And I believe I was more aware, and going through my 20s and, high school, college. High school was really shitty for me. But college was pretty cool, and I was a normal college student. I wanted to do all of the college type of things. And then I went on to medical school and more indoctrination and all of that nonsense. But, it took some time for me to kind of come back to where I was as a child, to that knowing that I had, where I saw spirits, I saw souls as a child. I remember very vividly that when I was a child, I had an imaginary friend. His name was John, and I would meet with him behind my dad's lounge chair, and that's where. And I remember him to this day. He wore overalls. He didn't wear a shirt, but he had overalls on, and sometimes a straw hat. He was like a country kid. He was maybe 2 years older than me, maybe 3 years older than me, I don't know. But we were friends. I would have my mom. I asked my mom when I was like 3 or 4 years old, when I hung out with my imaginary friend, to, make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for him. And she would do it. So I don't know. I mean, I remember these things vividly, though. And those kind of knowings, as we leave our childhood and we move into the next phase. Steiner talks about our first 7 years up until our first dentition, he calls it. Like, we have our first set of teeth come in, and then those are replaced by our adult set of teeth. So we have the deciduous teeth that are replaced by the permanent teeth. And he says that first phase of childhood, up until our permanent teeth, that's like we're in a different soul memory body at that time. And I think we're more connected to the other side, the before incarnation side, if you will. So Steiner, quite a remarkable human. But, I think that is maybe something we need to reawaken to in our adult life, because we have forgotten that. And because in that forgetting, we have allowed ourselves to become indoctrinated. And right now, with where we are, we're under the feel of Ahriman. Ahriman is one of the two pillars of Satan. And I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but the way Steiner talks about this, we have the Christ consciousness. I call that the middle path. And then on either side of that, we have Lucifer and Ahriman. And they both have their place in helping to help humanity as a whole progress. But Lucifer, and the way he worked, and I'm just saying he because I don't know what else to say, but Lucifer helped humanity wake up in a different way than Ahriman. But they're both kind of very much taking humanity out of that center middle path, that balanced path, where Christ is aligned. And Ahriman right now, Ahriman is under is influencing us highly at the moment. And, Steiner mentioned that Ahriman would incarnate around this time. Some people think perhaps it's Bill Gates, but who knows now that Bill Gates is getting a little ass whipping in the media right now. I don't watch the news, but, you hear these things. So who knows, right? Because, he wants to reduce the human population, and that's kind of scary, right? And he's also the one in charge of these injections. So would you really trust somebody that has a strong desire, a connection to the eugenics plan? His father was a Planned Parenthood higher up, and then he is, controlling all of, and profiting from, might I add, all of these injections. And he has stated he thinks that we have too many humans on this planet. Why would we trust him? Anyway, I digress a little bit from your question. So anyways, this karma, this situation of all of these meat golems, as you have quoted, that we have to deal with these people. That's a very good question. So let me continue on with what you've written to me. I have come to believe that those in this world who were not yet aware of what was going have had their kick in the ass needed to wake up. Anyone who in 2021 still doesn't think nothing is wrong, I believe, are lost causes. Well, and I'm pausing right now in your question. I can see that. I mean, there have been many opportunities in 2020 alone that should have caused people to start questioning. And I think a lot of people are, but so many people are afraid. And I think fear is the biggest manipulator of why people are not speaking up. So many people don't want to rock the boat. I mean, I mentioned my mom earlier. She doesn't want me to rock the boat. I mean, she was utterly angry with me when I told her I wasn't sure I can continue teaching at my current job if they're going to mandate me to wear a mask if I don't get an injection. And then I started thinking about how the hell, because of HIPAA laws, they have no right to know whether or not I get an injection, right? So, I mean, unless there's going to be some way, with all of this technology that they might be, I don't know if they're injecting things into people. I've seen video footage of people where at the injection site we're developing magnetism, where they can like stick a magnet at their arm and it's stuck there. Maybe they are injecting something that will help people scan them to determine whether or not they've received the injection, And isn't it, taking us back to the time period of the Jewish Holocaust? Who knows if that is a true story or not. I'm not claiming one way or the other, but the yellow star and you being visually represented as someone who should be looked down upon, and that's what people that have to wear the mask if they haven't received the injection are going to be looked down upon like that, right? It's crazy. I mean, I don't think the people at my college are thinking this through. I don't think they're thinking through, like, what the hell are they actually asking us to do? But anyway, I'm going to continue on with your question. So anyone who in 2021 doesn't think that nothing is wrong, I believe, are lost causes. I agree with you there. Sure, I could be wrong, and perhaps my not so great view of the world makes me think like this, but when I see people driving in their cars alone wearing masks, I can't help to think these people aren't people. Yes, I agree with you there too. It is quite disturbing to see people like that, or, walking their dogs by themselves, or, I saw a child, I was at the doctor's office a week or two ago for my yearly checkup. Actually, it was last week. I always schedule them at the end of the semester, or the end of the school year, and I didn't want to go in there with a, mask on, so I told the receptionist, when it's my turn, I'll be in the car, call me, and you can take me to a back room so I don't have to disrupt anybody with my maskless face. And she did. But I was sitting in my car in the parking lot, and my car was facing the sidewalk, and I saw this young schoolboy. He looked like maybe he was, 13, 14, walking by himself with a mask on. And these poor children, it breaks my heart to see them with masks on. It really does. My Facebook profile picture is basically unmask our children. John Wydogan, who is another content creator of One Great Work Network, recommended that Facebook profile picture, and I think it's great. I think it's a tragedy that children are covering up their faces. All right, continuing on with Sam's question. I thank you for your time and attention to this email and wish you the very best. And keep on keeping on. Well, thank you so much, Sam. And I assume Sam is a male, but I don't know for sure, because, Sam could be Samantha, right? But thank you, Sam, for that. And, I think that's a really good thing to bring up, and I do feel for you 100%. It is an incredibly lonely place for people that are aware and do see a problem, to be surrounded by so many people that do not think anything is wrong. Or perhaps they do think something's wrong and they're just out of fear not speaking up. And that's, both of those are quite scary to be a part of in society. In my concern of what I should do about my own job, just kind of taking a step away from these questions for a minute, I reached out to a friend of mine who I used to teach with, and then she has since switched colleges. And since she no longer teaches at the college I teach at, I decided to call her up. And, she is of the belief that, this is a real pandemic. And she says she knows many people who have had family members die, and it's never like anybody they know themselves, but it's always people they know through somebody else that has died. That seems to be the way it is, right? When people tell me about this and how dangerous it is. But, she has decided not to travel this summer because of this pandemic, and she seems to think I need to just talk to the faculty and see if I can just find online classes to teach, which might have to be the the case, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're going to want to accommodate me, because definitely my position is not the popular one, right? Those of us that want to focus on truth and being fearless. And that is really, I think, what it comes down to, being fearless. All right, question number 3. This is from John. I just talked about John. That was my imaginary friend when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I wonder if it's the same John. Anyway, hi Patty. Thanks for taking care. Oh, that was something else. This is John. He is in one of my classes. Now I recall that. Let me read the rest of the question though. You often mention carbohydrates being the essential fuel for humans. When I think of carbs, I think of potatoes, rice, bread, grains. All of these are often baked or cooked before consumption, which would typically denature any nutrition. As a raw vegetarian, what carbs do you consume and how many grams per day? Also, I've heard you talk about cooked meat and protein being hard on the kidneys. Is raw meat better, since the proteins aren't denatured? What are your thoughts about seafood or fish? Well, thank you, John, for that. Well, yes, potatoes, rice, bread, all of those are carbohydrates in the cooked state. Now remember, carbohydrate-rich foods do have some protein. You know, gluten is a protein, and that's what tends to be antigenic for many people. So a lot of people have gluten allergies, right? And that causes negative symptoms. So the denaturing of carbohydrate, like polysaccharides, they don't denature per se, but they can kind of like agglomulate during the cooking process. You've seen this, like if you've ever, burnt something like a carbohydrate-rich food. Think of like rice that's burnt to the bottom of a pot or anything that's carbohydrate-rich, but it's never completely just carbohydrate. It does have other macromolecules in it as well. And so, yeah, there is a benefit of not cooking. I mean, and as far as my own personal diet, right now I'm eating a lot of raw foods because it's warmer outside, and I tend to do that in the summertime. But in the winter, I do, eat some cooked foods here and there. But the raw foods are definitely the most nutritious because their chemistry has not been negatively affected by high heat or processing in the form of like high pressure. So that's, it's definitely better, in my opinion, to eat foods as naturally as possible, how they're brought to us from the earth. And, I am a vegan for ethical reasons, but, when you grow a plant, you don't want to cook it if at all possible. And definitely the fruits don't need to be cooked, right? Because they're just beautiful. I mean, this is why I'm a high fruit vegan, because fruits are highly nutritious. They've got the best mixture of, the simple sugars that fuel us, and also the phytonutrients. Think of all of the colors that ripe fruit comes in. This is why humans have color vision, so that we can determine the peak ripeness of a food. Like when, a berry is ripe, a strawberry, a blackberry, a blueberry. We see that bright, vibrant color, and then we know when we eat it, it's just going to do amazing things for us. So, not a fan of cooking. But yeah, carbohydrates themselves, technically, I guess you could say they denature. They kind of agglomulate. Proteins, though, definition-wise, they're more likely to fall under the category of denaturing. Like when you fry an egg, the albumin in the egg, which is kind of like a almost transparent, kind of not quite transparent, a little bit opaque, but you've all seen egg white before it's been fried, and then when you place it on the frying pan, it turns a white color. It's no longer, you can't see through it any longer. That's because the albumin protein has denatured, and that's a physical expression of that. Same thing would happen if you were to take that raw egg white and mix it with hydrochloric acids. So high heat and then strong acids, strong bases, they all denature. So the second part of your question was, what carbs do you consume and how many grams per day? Well, I don't really count grams. I just kind of eat when I'm hungry. And I don't know, let me go through what I've had today thus far. So for breakfast, what did I have? I made kind of a green smoothie / juice. So I juice greens. I picked some dandelion leaves from my backyard when I was watering my garden. There were some beautiful dandelion leaves, so I picked some of those. Dandelions are great for the liver, great for the kidney. And then I think I also, with those dandelion leaves, also juiced some kale and some spinach, if I'm not mistaken. And then I had some lemon, some beets. I had a half of a huge beet, cut it in half. I juiced that as well, and I think an orange. And then I mixed that with some frozen pineapple. So most of the food was juiced, and then mixing it with frozen pineapple and frozen blueberries made it like a nice, cool smoothie, right? Because the juice was kind of the liquid base, and then the other fruits in their frozen state, because I just happened to have a lot of those in my freezer, made it a smoothie. So that was my breakfast, and then I think a little bit later in the day I had I call it banana nice cream. So I just have some frozen bananas, and I mix it with a little bit of hemp milk. And sorry, I got a food delivery. It's outside right now. But I mixed it with some hemp milk, and actually I did eat with that this it's not like a granola bar, it's like a chewy date bar. It's macro bars, I think, but it's a vegan bar that I usually have on hand. And it's chocolate flavored, so it's got like raw cacao mixed with it, but it's chewy. And so sometimes I have banana nice cream with these macro bars, and that's a good little meal. And then I guess that's all I've eaten today. I don't know. I wasn't too hungry today, but I don't know I have no idea how many grams that was. And I'm sure, some people might say I didn't eat enough carbs, right? But I really just kind of go by how I feel. I mean, definitely some days I eat more than what I did today. I know yesterday I think I had a salad, and I think I just cut up some veggies with it. And I like to make my own salad dressing, so I'll like scoop half of an avocado with some lime juice and massage it into the greens. So yeah, I don't know. I don't count carbs. The next part of your question was about cooking meat and protein being hard on the kidneys. Is raw meat better? Well, I do feed raw meat to my cat and my dogs. My cat gets more raw meat than my dogs do. And my cat, cats are obligate carnivores. So, there's an interesting study with cats. They, and I don't know who did this study. I need to look that up. But they were studying these cats, and, they were not spayed or neutered, so they were procreating in this lab environment. And they were giving them raw meat, and then they had another group of cats in the same predicament that they were giving cooked meats. And over time, the raw meat-fed cats were better at procreating. And obviously that indicated better health. The cats, I think, after the third generation fed cooked meat, weren't able to procreate at all. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, cooking protein truly denatures the contractile proteins and the other types of proteins that you get in like muscle meat and the proteins in raw meat flesh. So those do denature when they're placed in fire, when they're cooked, when they're baked, and they're harder to break down. So it's harder for the enzymes to digest those proteins into amino acids as easily. Because another thing that happens when, these proteins are exposed to heat, it makes the protein form in a way that the peptide bonds can no longer be easily broken down. And then those proteins that are unnatural either are eliminated, meaning that we poop them out, or they could be absorbed in that abnormal state, again becoming antigenic, evoking an immune response. So this is why it's not so great to cook meat. Now keep in mind, humans, I think some humans can eat raw meat. I knew this woman actually, she ended up having a sex change, so now she's a man. But I remember she was the girlfriend of my bass player when I was in my last band. And she told me she craved raw meat. Like, she could see, like, she was hanging out with me one day, and I was feeding my dogs raw meat, and she, like, wanted to eat it. And I'm like, I don't think I'd eat that. I thought that was very interesting. You know, I am an ethical vegan. And some people are alarmed that I feed my dogs raw meat. Well, keep in mind, first and foremost, my dogs don't get raw meat every day. One of them gets raw meat every third day, and the other two get raw meat maybe once a week. My 15-year-old, though, he gets raw meat maybe once every couple of weeks because as dogs age, you know, their kidneys can't process that as easily. And so he's definitely getting more vegan food, my 15-year-old. And with that said, I think dogs can do quite well on a vegan diet. I get backlash on that as well. There's a woman I follow. I've been following her for years. Her name is Nora Lenz, and she has a Facebook page. It used to be called No More Vet Bills, but now I think it's called about something like Healthy Diet for Healthy Cat and Dog Diet or something like that. But she's written a couple of books about the natural hygiene way of feeding cats and dogs. And I think she agrees that cats, you know, should get a lot of raw meat, but dogs, they do good with, you know, they're true omnivores, and they can get away with eating meat, with eating, you know, fruits, grains. So I give my dogs a mixture of foods. So they do get raw meat, they do get quinoa with veggies mixed in, like sweet potato, or like right now, right before this video, I'd made them quinoa with squash, some greens, some like green beans, some peas. So I mix it up, and then they get fruit meals, you know, like mango or bananas or berries. They love fruit. In fact, as a treat, a lot of times, to get them into the house, if I need them to come in, I'll give them little blueberries that I have hanging around. So yeah, so dogs are omnivores. And I know as an ethical vegan, I should feed them, you know, food that has not been killed. And I get that. And it is an ethical thing I struggle with because, like my 3-year-old dog, he's 80 pounds. And I've always struggled with him keeping weight on. I mean, he gets really, really thin. He's got a lot of energy. And if I don't feed him raw meat, he just gets too thin. And so by me mixing his diet up, it helps him, you know, maintain his activity level. So I don't have all of the answers. And, you know, I know that some people say you have to feed your dogs all raw meat. Other people will say they should be vegan. I don't know for sure. And it's challenging because I don't like the fact that animals have to die for my animals to eat meals, but I you know, I'm still a human struggling on this planet, and so I'm doing the best I can, I guess. But I do try to feed them food. If it's meat, it is raw. I don't cook it. I don't give them cooked meat, because when you denature it, it just you're taking the health away from it, and you're making it harder for them to digest, and antigenic. So that means that they could have an immune response to it. But yeah, and then again, the kidneys have to eliminate all of that. So when the kidneys eliminate that at a high level, it is hard on the kidneys. And that's why my 15-year-old dog, I have a 15-year-old border collie who's standing at the top of the stairs, and he knows I just made quinoa with squash, and he wants me to come up there and feed it to him now. But he doesn't get a lot of raw meat because that does kind of, you know, you have to have healthy kidneys to eliminate all of the unused amino acids, and then all of the other products of protein catabolism, protein breakdown. You know, the liver is a little bit taxed by high meat diets as well, high protein diets, because the liver has to so when you break down like proteins into amino acids, in our body, we recycle a lot of the amino acids instead of eliminate them. But if you eat too many amino acids, the amino acids have to be detoxified in such a way that they can be eliminated through the kidneys. And part of that process involves taking the amino group, the NH2 group, converting that first to ammonia and then to urea. And then urea is the most abundant of the nitrogenous waste products in our blood plasma. And, people, when they have blood work done, they can have their blood urea nitrogen, their BUN measured, and that's an indication of how well your kidneys are getting rid of that. Well, your BUN's going to be quite high if you eat a lot of meat. So, like people that eat a high protein diet, they have usually high levels of creatinine and high levels of BUN. Or BUN is not a molecule, but a high BUN reading. And that's really, really hard on the kidneys. I've worked with former bodybuilders that did all of the protein shakes, and, that puts so much stress on their kidneys. And then they're wishing, with all of the lower back pain that they have later in life, they're wishing they didn't eat all of that protein. Anyway, and what are your thoughts on seafood or fish? You got to be careful with fish and seafood. I mean, our oceans are getting more and more polluted by the day. So I don't know. My cat, every now and then, when I don't have enough raw meat to feed him, I do give him like sardines now and then, just canned sardines. I know they're cooked, but that's the easiest way for me to get them. And if you're going to get seafood, you want to get it like the animals that are feeding on the plants primarily. But if you have like a fish that feeds on another fish that then feeds on another fish, you start to bioaccumulate the toxins, and then that's an unhealthy fish, right? So just, get the fish that are not going to be eating other fish, the fish that eat like plankton or other non-animal sources. They eat the chlorophyll-rich sources as their own fuel. So I hope that helps a little bit. But, it is better to eat no animals. And, you take it with a grain of salt. I mean, concerns for vegans obviously are like vitamin B12. Back in the day when we used to just go out and forage our foods, we would eat a lot of the bacteria that were associated with the roots of the plants we were consuming. And those bacteria naturally produced vitamin B12. So, every now and then, and I'm not religious about this by any means, but every now and then I take, a little bit of vitamin B12. I do a sublingual methylcobalamin under my tongue. And my physician, because I teach, I have a primary care physician, and he knows I'm a vegan, and he does blood work on me, and every now and then he'll do B12, and they always come back normal. So it's not a problem. But it is something you want to be aware of. Vitamin B12 deficiencies can cause pernicious anemia, and you don't want that to happen because, you want to make sure you're producing enough vitamin or red blood cells. All right, so let's go on to the next question. We're right at 6 o'clock. We might take a little break in just a second, but let me read this last question. Actually, this is a series of 4 questions. These are from Mark. Question 1, is there a greater process than cellular respiration in the body? So Mark obviously is in my class, and my cell biology class. And I know cell biology, I mentioned to my students a couple of weeks ago that my favorite organelle in the cell is the mitochondria, which is the organelle where the majority of the metabolic processes in the overall metabolic reaction called cellular respiration take place. And is there a greater process? I don't know. I mean, I think it would be an opinion. What do you mean by greater? But cellular respiration is quite important for the cell because it is the metabolic process by which we create energy, ATP. So it's quite important, and I don't know. I don't think that, there's lots of metabolic processes that are quite important. Like, protein synthesis, very important. All of the anabolic and catabolic reactions that take place, primarily in the liver, because our liver is kind of like this organ of just chemical change, right? So it changes one type of molecule into another type of molecule. Processes like gluconeogenesis, glycogenolysis, a lot of G words. They take place in the liver where we're changing molecules up, making sure we're meeting our body's demands, which is always, it's so interesting that our body knows how to do this. So like if you are eating a high protein diet and your carbohydrate levels get really low, well, your liver can convert protein into carbohydrate. That's what gluconeogenesis is, creating glucose out of non-carbohydrate molecules like proteins or fats. And we can do the opposite as well. So if we don't have enough of a certain amino acid, we can convert glucose into a specific, non-essential amino acid or fat. A lot of carbohydrates get converted into fat, especially if you eat a lot of carbs and you're not exercising. You're not, using that for ATP production. Your body will store it. And glucose, by the way, which is the primary energy currency molecule that our body likes to use for ATP production, our body does not like to excrete glucose at all. It holds on to it. It will not eliminate it. So if we have too much glucose, it will either store, well, if it can't use all of the glucose for energy, for ATP production, it will store that glucose as glycogen, or it will convert it into fat. But it doesn't get rid of it. The only time we get rid of glucose in the urine is when you have a disease, like diabetes mellitus. And that's because we can't absorb the glucose into our cells, either due to a lack of insulin production or due to the receptors for insulin not responding to the insulin. In either case, and that's where we differentiate between type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus. But the glucose stays in the blood, and it maxes out the reabsorptive capacity in the kidneys, and we end up excreting it into the urine. And that's not good. And then you develop glycosuria, which is glucose present in the urine. Bad thing to have. But I don't know, I'm quite fond of cellular respiration. So if you were asking for my opinion, I would say cellular respiration is like the coolest metabolic process. And it includes, my favorite step within cellular respiration is the electron transport chain. Fascinating little series of protein electron carriers that at the end of that series of proteins you have oxygen, the final electron acceptor. And while the electrons are passing through these proteins, we're pumping hydrogen ions into the intermembrane space, creating a proton gradient, which is then the actual potential energy source for the ATP production. It's amazing. All of these metabolic processes that take place within the human body. I'm always, when I teach this, and I teach it semester after semester after semester. I've been teaching since 2001 at the college level. And even before 2001, in graduate school, I was a teaching assistant for many years. So I've been doing this for a long time. And it never ceases to amaze me how amazing the human body is. And that's just what we know. I mean, there's so much we don't know. And I'm a very spiritual person. I've become more spiritual, much to the dismay of academia. I've become very spiritual as I've progressed through college teaching. Many of my colleagues, under the influence of Ahriman, bringing this back to Steiner, under the influence of Ahriman, many of my colleagues have become very materialistic, very mechanistic, treating the human body like a car, like a machine. And this is where allopathic medicine gets away with, like taking out organs. I had a client that I was working with that was having some liver gallbladder issues, and she did not want to have her gallbladder removed. And I don't blame her. The gallbladder is there for a reason. And many people that have that little cute organ removed, they have a lot of negative side effects afterwards. Obviously, one of them is not being able to digest fats. But, with the ability to emulsify fats, and that's what the bile salts in our bile, which the gallbladder stores, that's what they do, comes with the ability to adequately absorb into our intestinal tract via the blood, or via the lymph, really, are fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. So there's lots of implications, to removing an organ. And I don't recommend it. I mean, this is why Natural Law Health is the name of my website. I trust nature. I want to leave this planet with all of the organs I came here with. So I don't want any of my organs removed, and I don't recommend that other people do so either. I mean, keep in mind, am I going to say, as a blanket statement that you should never have an organ removed? No. I think there's a time and a place for certain procedures to occur. What's unfortunate in our current medical paradigm of allopathic medicine is that they are just like crazy with the knife. They love surgical procedures. They love removing things. I mean, back in the day, and I don't know if this is still true, but when I was in medical school, it was true for sure, and I was very taken aback by it. But a lot of times they would, like if they were going to do a gallbladder surgery, let's just take out the appendix. I mean, we have the person open. That thing could rupture in the future. Let's just take it out, since we're already, here with an open abdominal cavity. Well, now, go figure, we know that the appendix has a very important purpose. So we used to think it was a vestigial organ, that it was just like this little blind sac that had the potential of harboring pathogens, and then it would lead to an inflammatory reaction, and the little appendix would swell and burst open, and then you have internal bleeding. I mean, it happens, right? Inflammation anywhere can happen. But now we know the purpose of the appendix. It actually has two purposes. It is a site where we have many lymphatic nodules, and that's where we house many of our immune cells. They've talked a lot about how our microbiome and our intestinal tract is a very important part of the immune system, but also those microbiota, the microorganisms that are there living symbiotically with us, if we wipe them out, let's say with broad spectrum antibiotics, we can replace the bacteria we have killed off, because there's always a core origin of those bacteria in the appendix. So this was like a study, I remember reading it in my third full-time teaching position. Or no, my second. I've had 4 full-time teaching jobs. First one was in Arizona, second one was in Illinois. That one in Illinois was my favorite because I really liked the people there. It was a good school. The third one was in Seattle, and then the fourth one is where I live now. Somewhere in the Midwest. That's all I'll say. And anyway, it was during my time at my second full-time job that I read that study, and I was like, wow, what do you know? And I would always share it with my students. I always like to share with them current research that crosses my desk. And yeah, so the appendix, very important. Not good to remove it. If you can keep it, keep it. And just because they don't know the function of it or the importance of it doesn't mean it's not important, right? So removing organs haphazardly, I don't even know how we got onto this question about removing organs. But anyway, let's go on to question 2 from Mark. How does ATP relate to strength or muscular power? I understand VO2 max is used for endurance athletes to understand their oxygen to carbon levels. More oxygen present at the cell than ATP cycles begins. Well, I am a physiologist, but an exercise physiologist, I know they have a different vernacular to describe certain metabolic processes than me as kind of a standard physiologist that has just learned physiology mostly kind of in under the medical umbrella. So I don't use VO2 max too much when I'm teaching, but I can tell you how ATP is important for muscular power. And Mark, if you are planning on taking my human anatomy and physiology courses for future naturopathic students, we will go into this quite in depth during the course where I cover the muscular system, focusing primarily on skeletal muscles, those muscles that move our skeleton, like biceps brachii, rectus femoris, all of those. So ATP is part of the muscular contraction cycle. And so ATP binds to myosin, the myosin head, and before the contraction cycle even begins, the the ATP is broken down into ADP and phosphate, and that helps to kind of cock open the myosin head, kind of like if you're pulling back a bow and arrow. And that gives that myosin head a potential energy. And it just sits there with that potential energy. And then when a certain molecule called tropomyosin is pushed away on actin, the myosin head grabs onto actin and it pulls it. And this happens on both sides of what's called the sarcomere, and that causes muscular contraction. So we can see that the potential energy in the myosin that came from ATP is fueling that shortening of the muscle overall. It's a lot more complex than that, and like I said, we will go into it, but that's kind of the direct answer as to how ATP helps to or allow muscles to contract, muscular power per se. And another interesting thing about muscles is that there are several different ways in which our muscles create ATP. So skeletal muscles could produce ATP aerobically with oxygen, which is really the way to produce the most ATP per glucose. You get 36 ATPs per glucose when with oxygen you're able to create ATP. But many times our muscles do not have oxygen available. So like when you're contracting like your biceps brachii, you can see my muscle is still somewhat big. I have a jacket on because my basement is freezing. I turned on my AC yesterday, mostly for my 15-year-old dog because he does not like heat and it was getting kind of hot. Otherwise, I would have just dealt with the heat. But anyway, before I digress too much, so there you can see my contracted biceps brachii muscle. When they bulge up like that, they pinch the blood vessels that are delivering the oxygen. And then they go through a momentary state of having to produce ATP without oxygen. And that's what we call peak muscular activity, where you're doing a lot of contraction, like a lot of biceps curls, and you're not able to get the oxygen there. And that means that those muscles during that peak activity have to produce ATP anaerobically without oxygen. And when that occurs, lactic acid is a byproduct, and you're only getting 2 ATPs per glucose. So it's not really a preferred way of ATP production, but it does allow us to get by in those low oxygen environments. So as far as endurance athletes, how they build endurance is a couple of different ways. I mean, obviously, the more you exercise, like jogging, and you're doing those types of endurance activities, you do actually in your muscles produce more mitochondria, so your muscles become better able to aerobically produce ATP. Also, as your heart and your circulatory system are able to deliver the oxygen to your muscle cells, that too will come with time for endurance activities. This is why usually when people first start an exercise regimen, when they first start exercising, their cardiovascular system is not ready to deliver that oxygen in an efficient manner. And they do a lot of the fermentation, the glycolysis fermentation, where they're producing lactic acid. And that's why you get a lot of muscle soreness. And so the more you exercise, the more you become adapted to aerobic respiration, and then the less lactic acid, and you're not as sore. And you get to the point where you can just like jog longer periods of time too. Which I might add, when I became fruitarian, when I did 6 months of nothing but fruit, and this was like in 2010, that raw energy in the fruit gave me so much fuel that I had to move my body. I mean, I was eating such a pure diet of organic fruits that I had to exercise. And that's when I started doing 6 miles of jogging a day, because I had to. And I think our bodies have to move. Our bodies today in our modern society, because we eat such a shitty diet, people don't feel that ever. They don't feel that pure energy. And when I work with clients and I'm, recommending to them to eat a lot of fruit as part of their way to gain back their health, and if they stick with it, not only do they eliminate more effectively and they get all of the junk out, they're removing the obstructions, but then they, after those major eliminative events, they have such a profound energy. I mean, it truly is. It's like something comes within you. You know, fruit in its natural state, its organic state, it's amazing. I mean, you have to experience it, though, to believe it. And if you can get to that state where the fuel from fruit is fueling your cells, you're going to feel amazing. Many people are, and it will take a little bit of like a Herxheimer reaction to get through. I mean, you have to eliminate, and that can feel kind of shitty. But on the other side of that, it's great. And so one thing I recommend to the clients that want to work with me is how do we deal with those Herxheimer reactions? Well, herbs are wonderful. Herbs are just plants, but they're, you know, organ focused, helping with detoxification and rebuilding, regenerating. So the herbs can really be helpful when you're going through a healing protocol, and they're just, you know, helping. It's really to strengthen those organs of detoxification, help you release. Because if you don't get the stuff out and it stays there, it can be problematic, right? It's not so good. I remember when I first was doing a major detox and I wasn't eliminating as much as I should. And I remember I became pretty sore and pretty sick. But then on the other side of that, you know, after I did eliminate the junk out of me, then I felt great. The third question from Mark: why does man focus on vitamin C, even within fruits when it's an acid? What is the benefit of this? Or is this another illusion of man? Also, you cannot state vitamin C in fruit is the same as the isolate. Why is the fruit vitamin C focused on so much in this way? Why not electrolytes? So, vitamin C, and you're calling it an acid because I assume you're thinking of citric acid, citric acid, which is part of the Krebs cycle, by the way. You know, vitamin C, it's important. One of the things it's important for is collagen production. So a lack of vitamin C means a lack of collagen production, and that's what scurvy is. So many of you have heard of scurvy. I think sailors back in the day, when they were on these long trips overseas on a ship where there weren't any resources for vitamin C rich foods, they developed scurvy. And with scurvy, you don't produce enough collagen, your bones become weak. Because collagen is the major protein in our bone. It's also the major protein, it's the most abundant protein in the body. It's in all of our tissues, it's in our skin, it's all over the place. So that is, I would say, one of the main important functions of vitamin C is collagen production. So you need it, you know, and I don't think it's an illusion because people do actually become quite ill with conditions like scurvy if they lack vitamin C. But you did say something there that's quite right. I think the vitamin C that's packaged in a fruit is much healthier than taking vitamin C as an isolate. You know, like a supplement of vitamin C. It's always better to get your fruits, or I'm sorry, to get your vitamins, your minerals, all of the synchronistic ways in which these phytonutrients work together within one package of a raw food. That's the ideal way to consume any food. When you consume isolates, like supplements, you have the risk of becoming quite imbalanced. Nature knows how to balance us. Isolates that you buy from, you know, the health food store or Walmart, wherever you get your vitamin C supplements, you can become unbalanced there, right? So it's much better to get them in food. I agree. And then you also write, I am really looking for ways to measure someone's ATP and combine this with iridology and a wellness assessment for performance athletes. Well, Mark, I think that would be awesome if you can do that, to measure someone's ATP. I don't know, like I said, I don't know a lot about VO2 max. I'd have to do some research on that. And I'm trying to kind of approach these weekly questions coming into it just with my own knowledge. But if you gain any information on how to do that, please share it with me. And then connecting it to iridology, I think, would be quite awesome. for those of you that aren't aware, iridology is the study of the iris as a way to assess somebody's health. The iris is reflective of our body, our genetic weaknesses, any types of congestion, where things have deposited in our body, perhaps interfering with bodily function. So there's a lot you can glean about a person by reading their irises. And as part of my health assessments, I do iris readings. In fact, today, because tomorrow I have 2 clients back to back having initial consultations with me. I spent all morning basically today preparing their iris analysis presentations for them that I'll go over with them tomorrow. But it's always quite interesting. I always do the iris analysis before I do a review of their health questionnaire, and they always line up. It's like I didn't even have to look at the health questionnaire. I already knew what was going on in their body. So it's quite remarkable. All right, so those were all of the questions I have this week. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go on a little potty break, and I'm going to play my, what do you call it when you're like at a play or an opera? The intermission. This is my intermission music. Hello all, I'm back again. Hopefully that intermission wasn't too long. I want to thank everybody that sent me questions. So if you do want to send me questions, if you're watching the recording of this video, I'll have my email down below the video. Hopefully on the YouTube if I'm not completely canceled. But if I am canceled on YouTube, I am on LBRY and Odyssey, and I might explore other channels to post on. But it's getting crazy out there, and this is part of with one of the questions that I went over. The people out there, I think the person called them meat golems. It's true. I mean, these individuals, they just believing the official story and going along with it. Who knows? Maybe they actually do believe they're going to kill somebody's grandmother if they walk out their front door without a face diaper. I mean, if you believe that, you're completely indoctrinated. That's all I have to say. There's no scientific evidence to that whatsoever. And keep in mind, I'm not very Ahrimanic, with how I approach this. I don't think, man's science is not the end-all, be-all. And this is what Mark Pastio calls scientism, right? Scientism, where we treat science like a religion. And that's not truth, my friends. If you can't question the science, then it's not science. Science should always be questioned. It should always be further explored. And they don't want us to do any such thing with this whole pandemic. They want to control the narrative. They want to control us. So I wish people could see that. This is like a complete, mind fuckery. I don't understand why people cannot see that there's something critically wrong. That the fact that we're not allowed to question their narrative of this, about the fast-tracked injection, which I'm not going to use the V word, simply because I don't want to get, I'm going to try to stay on YouTube as long as I can. But who knows, right? It's getting pretty close there, folks, where I might be off. My last live stream recording is not on YouTube, by the way, because I think I went a little bit, I had some fun with that one. But yeah, if you can't question it, then what's the purpose, right? And, there's a lot of dangers with these injections. The adjuvants alone, which they add to these injections to enhance the immune response, they are problematic, like aluminum, polysorbate 80, methyl in its various forms that they try to sneakily get in there by attaching it to some other functional group. And then they could say, oh, we don't have this methyl form anymore, and so everybody thinks it's safe. They're lying to the pharmaceutical companies are some of the most shady organizations, businesses in the world. They just want to sell. They want to make millions and trillions of dollars, billions, trillions, and that's the agenda. It's to sell, sell, sell. And it's a good agenda, where people can make a lot of money, and the same drugs that are helping people make a lot of money are also helping to kill people if your goal is to reduce human population on this planet. So I don't understand why people trust this so much. I mean, I don't know. Why is it that why do I question it so much? I mean, I've turned I've looked at myself in this whole narrative and my reaction. I've been pretty, I guess I've stuck with how I look at everything, though, with regards to natural law and science. I mean, I've had this outlook, though, for many, many years. I mean, it's why the whole injection issue is why I left medicine in the first place. I saw way too many things that were shady. People in my own family died after these injections. My cousin's baby. They said it was SIDS, but even I was talking to this about my mom a couple of days ago. The pediatrician actually admitted, yeah, it was probably the injection that did it. And then he said after that, he would give her remaining children just half a dose of the injection. And, there's so much evidence that many of these, the few injections we used to get, like when I was a kid, it was like 3 or 4. Now it's like close to 50, 60, 70, that by the time a child is 18, they'll have like close to 70 of these injections. It's pure insanity, folks. It is pure insanity. But many of these diseases were already starting to be filtered out of the populations. They were already on the decline. And then the injection jumps in right at the correct time to make people think, oh, it saved the day. But it really didn't save the day. It was probably something through the way our body works to adapt. We just weren't affected by it anymore. And for those of you that, do want to learn more about what I'm talking about, if you're interested in science, true science, not this science with an agenda, not this religion of science, which is scientism. I do teach science courses. I mean, this is what my full-time job is. But I teach it with the perspective of truth and nature, natural law. And in the cell biology course that I'm currently teaching, it's on Sundays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, so that would be 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be getting into a little bit about how cells communicate, and I'll talk a little bit about a book. This book. Oh, I guess on my screen it's backwards. The Contagion Myth by Tom Cowan. A little bit of reflection there. And I'm going to discuss exosomes. And, many other, like Andrew Kaufman has brought this up in his, and he's another, Kaufman and Cowan, both of these medical doctors have been banned from YouTube, Facebook, all of it. Anybody that has a different perspective, who's questioning the science, why are they banned? It's not science. It's not true science, what they're doing. Anyway, we're going to be getting into exosomes, that theory of health, and also a little bit about the terrain theory. Pleomorphism is another way of describing it. But, Béchamp, which was a different... he was a different scientist at the time of Louis Pasteur. And Louis Pasteur is really the person that kind of brought onto the knowing of humanity the whole germ theory. And Béchamp had a different theory, the terrain theory. and or pleomorphism, he might have called it. And that our bodies naturally respond to stress by releasing what are called exosomes, which are through exocytosis. We're just kind of releasing genetic material to communicate to nearby cells regarding the stress we're being exposed to. And books called, there's a couple of books. What is the name of the book? Mark Passio shared it with me originally. The Invisible Rainbow, which Tom Cowan does refer to. And in The Invisible Rainbow, they go through a history of electromagnetic frequencies that have had an impact on humanity. And during a new technology that was introduced to the world and new frequencies in the environment, we saw at the advent of those same frequencies pandemics occurring, like the Spanish flu in the early 1900s, and like this one. And what frequency could be in our environment today that's causing this, if it's truly, a threat, but causing people to feel ill? Well, could it be, the number and then the letter? Does that look like a G? I think you know what I'm talking about. I am trying to be a good girl with this video. I'm trying. It's hard. It really is. But yeah, those towers are all over the place. And it's scary that I have been working from home since March of 2020. That's when this pandemic began. And I rarely leave the house. I have food delivered to me. In fact, I have some food on my front door that I need to get once our live stream is over. They always deliver it during the live stream. I wish they could deliver it a little bit earlier in the day. But anyway, I have food delivered to me. I walk my dogs around the neighborhood, but I really don't leave the house. I might go and visit my mom and dad every now and then, but I'm not really leaving the house. And the couple of times that I did leave the house, like, for instance, I take my dogs to a vet that is 2 hours away, one direction, because he's a homeopath and he doesn't, inject things. So I like him. I don't want to go, my cat hair. I was petting my cat for a second and the hair is flying all over the place. But I remember driving to his office and seeing all of these towers that I had not seen before. And it's really quite scary. And these frequencies are creating stress because we are electrical beings. I mean, every one of our cells has a transmembrane potential, an electrical potential across the cellular membrane. And abnormal potentials can affect our potentials. And how do our cells respond? One method is to release exosomes, which are little pinched off membranes with genetic material, to communicate that stress to other cells and to other beings to help us all adapt more easily. And I'm not saying it's healthy to adapt to these abnormal frequencies, but our bodies are trying. And anyway, the whole germ theory for many of these diseases, these pandemics, they couldn't isolate a bacteria, because usually they blame it on one of the bacteria that are all over. And the bacteria, it's never their fault either. They only show up because there's diseased tissue, and they have to break that tissue down so we can rebuild healthier tissue. That's what all bacteria are doing for the most part. They live in a symbiotic relationship with us. They're helping us, and yet we kill them all off. So I'm not a fan of antibiotics either. But viruses are the same way. They're just exosomes released by cells that are stressed. And because we happen to find them at the site of what we think a diseased tissue is, and, they can use something like, it took until we had the technology like electron microscopes to actually see these abnormal vesicles. And then we could say, there is our culprit. That's what we'll blame. It's really nice for the pharmaceutical companies because they benefit from selling antivirals, just like they benefited from selling antibiotics. Do you notice that everything allopathy and the pharmaceutical companies It's all anti. It's anti-life. It's quite sad how this has become what we consider health. And it's nothing even closely related to health. But, exosomes being found at a diseased tissue, when you blame the virus for the disease, it's like blaming, and Tom Cowan uses this analogy, so I'm giving him credit, but it's like blaming firefighters for the fire. Because if you drive by a fire and you always see a fire truck, does that mean the fire truck? Well, it's always there where there's a fire. That means the fire trucks are the source of these fires, and we need to get rid of all fire trucks. That makes no sense. They're there because they're trying to fix it, right? And that's what these exosomes and even the bacteria are there to address the problem. The cause of the problem, when it comes to our tissues and our cells, is the stress in many cases. And many times these stresses are electromagnetic. The electromagnetic smog that permeates our environment, and it's becoming more and more and more common. All of these towers that are all over the place. And even other electronic devices in our homes and everywhere. The cell phones. Hell, I've been having my cell phone sit next to me this entire time. That's not good. I should have left it upstairs. But other types of toxins. So dietary, right? So we have poor diets that are very stressful on the body. And, if you read anything that comes in a package, a box, a plastic bag, and if it has an ingredient label, this is what I tell my clients. Don't eat anything that has an ingredient label. You should be able to figure out the ingredients just by looking at your food. Like you look at an apple and you can say, okay, ingredient, apple. And that's what you eat. So when I work with clients and they want to attain health, they want to remove dis-ease, because as a naturopath, I don't deal with diseases. That belongs to allopaths. They're the ones that made up these diseases. And plus, people like myself, natural, unlicensed naturopaths, we get in trouble talking about their diseases. They can't really threaten me because I'm not licensed, so that's good, right? I don't want a license. But, where was I going with this? Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart there. But yeah, they deal with diseases. I deal with nature. And by aligning with nature, you can regain your health in the truest way possible. So when I put people on like these dietary protocols, high fruit, high raw vegetables, and I also recommend certain herbal formulas to help them detoxify, to eliminate more efficiently, and to help strengthen certain organs as well, especially like endocrine glands. This is true healing, because you're not really just going to, people might come to me because, they don't want their thyroid gland they want their thyroid gland to work better, or they want their pancreas to work better, or they have, intestinal issues. They come to me with one specific problem, maybe two, maybe three. Some people have a lot of them. But when you go through a true healing protocol, you fix everything. Because when you align with health, when you align with natural law, you're not just, your body's like, oh, well, their heart's kind of iffy, and their brain's kind of iffy, and their muscles are they don't work very well. We're only going to work on the thyroid issue. So that's the only thing we're going to focus on. That's not how nature works. It's an entire body detoxification and cleanse. So all of your interstitial spaces, all of the tissue spaces in your body will be cleansed. And we will remove, with the help of the good old lymphatic system, we will remove that congestion out of those tissue spaces, freeing up those tissues so that they can work more efficiently, so they can receive the oxygen, receive the nutrients that they need, and get rid of, eliminate the waste products. So you have to detoxify. People ask me, what do you mean by detoxify? I'm not an alcoholic. It's not, and that's another word that has been occulted by allopathy. They basically use detoxification as a word that's only meant for people that are on drugs, alcohol and drugs. No, it's everything that's abnormal that our body should not be holding on to within the tissue spaces. So that congestion, it's held on within the tissue spaces. We need to eliminate it. And after you eliminate, then the healing really begins. That's when the energy comes in. That's when people feel really good. And then we start rebuilding. So a lot of times in a typical protocol, I fine tune it for each individual human that I work with. But typically, I'll recommend like a very high fruit and green juice type of diet. And you do that for a while. In North America, where I live, like beginning in September, organic grapes are now available. Grapes are wonderful for cleansing. So I might put somebody on like a 20 to 40 day grape fast. And it's not a real fast, because a fast means you're not eating something, but nothing but grapes for 40 days. And this is like in the days of Arnold Ehret, the old school healers that have been doing this well before, modern allopathy came to the scene. That's how they truly healed people. And they had fasting centers where people would just like do nothing but water. So water fasting is another method, which is pretty direct and pretty, effective. But most people are too unhealthy to even embark upon a water fast because of, again, that cleansing reaction. If you have a lot of crap held into your interstitial spaces, it's going to really, unrattle. It's going to really, I don't know if that's the best word. It's really going to shake you up a bit. And that shaking up, some people can't handle it. So sometimes the slower detoxification method is a little bit safer. And when you're doing it with fruits and vegetables, it is a little bit slower. Slower than a water fast would be, per se. I have some, let's see if I can share this with you all. I'll pull it up. Ooh, this is one thing I want to share with you. Maybe I'll share this one with you really quick. 1 second. Since we were talking about injections, let me switch my screen really quick. Okay, hopefully you can see this. I don't know. I'm assuming that you guys can hear me. But do you see this this chart? This is a chart from a book I have. In the next scene, when I switch back to my screen, I'll show you the book where I got this from. It's a homeopathic book I use as a reference for cats and dogs. And you can see that this is a chart where they're looking at polio injections. And when they introduce the killed viral injection, I'm not using the V word for a reason because I'll get kicked off the YouTube. And then the live polio injection, which, causes polio, by the way. Anyway, notice that it was already on the decline when these were introduced. See how sneaky they are? It was already on the decline when this was introduced. It was. You can look at the verbiage at the very bottom of that chart. It says the death rate declined by more than 50% before the injection was introduced. And this was in the United States and Great Britain. Crazy stuff there, folks. This is the book, Homeopathic Care for Cats and Dogs. Great book. Homeopathy, I've seen homeopathy work miracles in dogs. Seriously. And cats, for that matter. I've seen some amazing responses to certain homeopathic remedies. I mean, one dog in particular, my dog Lucky, my soulmate dog, she was on death's door, and one homeopathic remedy brought her back to life. Seriously, I kid you not. She was 14 years old, and I thought she was going to pass away. The vet told me, take her home to die. And I called a different homeopathic vet. This was when I first, a beautiful person on Facebook said, call this vet. And I did. I didn't even know who this person was. But little do they know, them encouraging me to make this phone call. And I made the phone call. And I got a hold of Dr. Bernstein in Florida. He was the homeopathic vet. He overnighted me the remedy. I gave it to her. And like the next day she's walking around. She lived another 1.5 years. That's how much more life I had with her. So, truly grateful. And then since that time, I've, studied homeopathy. Using it for humans has never been as effective, in my opinion, but using it with animals has been incredibly effective. I was going to show you something else, though. I know I have 10 minutes left. But I just wanted to show you a couple of documents I typically share with my clients. I'm trying to find one in particular. Yes, this is it. Okay. So let me share my screen again. Hopefully you can see this. So here is my levels of detoxification sheet. You can see at the bottom, and this is much better than like the food pyramid or whatever crap the dietitians that want to keep you in a state of ill health are recommending. But they do put at the things that we should avoid: animal protein, fish, dairy, eggs, cheese, grains, all of that stuff at the bottom. Now above that, nuts, seeds, cooked vegetables, and leafy greens are a little bit better. Okay. Now leafy greens I think are much better juiced. It does take a lot of work for us to chew, to masticate those greens and squeeze out the juice. So even though I do eat salads occasionally, I highly recommend juicing your green leafy vegetables. Above that, you can see raw fruits and vegetables, highly effective for health and detoxification. Then the green smoothies and the juices. That's what I had for breakfast. It was actually a green juice, and then I mixed it with frozen pineapple and frozen blueberry, so it became a smoothie with the green juice as the base liquid. And then we move on to fruit for breakfast and lunch and a salad for dinner. And then a diet of 100% fruit, and then a diet of just fruit smoothies, then fruit juice, mono fruit. So what that means is just eating one fruit at a time. Mono fruit juice, and then at the pinnacle of a detoxification, like a very fast detoxification experience, is water fasting. So what this is basically is it's a way to control how quickly you detoxify. When you get closer to the tip, you're detoxifying more quickly. Sorry, I'm almost at the end of 2 hours of talking nonstop. But when you get to the tip, the water fasting, that's the most effective and fastest way to detoxify, to get the junk out. And it's going to get you there pretty fast. But with that, you have to be prepared for elimination. And you could have some very severe Herxheimer reactions. So I never recommend anybody water fasting. I usually recommend people begin down here. In fact, there are diets that I typically recommend. And I can share one of those with you. Let me come back to this screen. Let me get my personal diets out. All right, so let's come back to another worksheet. So here's a pretty good detoxifying dietary plan. It's basically fruits, berries, and melons for breakfast, with a mid-morning snack of like a green juice. Then lunch, more fruits, berries, and melons with another green juice snack. And then dinner, fruits, berries, and melons. With maybe once a week, up to 3 times a week, having a large salad. And mono fruit eating, again, is just one fruit at a time. So like a meal of just melon or a meal of just grapes. These are healing diets, and people might think they're boring. They might be, but you're just fueling yourself with the purest of foods, right? It's just pure food that you're eating in its natural state. So Anyway, those are some of the things I share with clients when I'm helping them heal and reverse dis-ease. For those of you that do have pets that you want to help reverse illness, do try to find a good homeopath as a veterinarian. I love homeopathic vets. They're my favorite. They typically are on the up and up with knowing that injections are quite dangerous, especially for the little innocent bodies of our, feline and canine friends, because they are quite, especially the yearly ones, those are so hard on them. I mean, just so you know, cats should be living into their 30s, dogs well into their 20s. And our dogs and cats are just, they inject them, just like they do children, so early on. Many of them, over and over. I mean, why are they trying to destroy life? Why is the allopathic method of teaching future physicians, future veterinarians, why is it so anti-life? And it is. It really is. All right. I know I'm getting to the end of my live stream. I really did enjoy this live stream today, and I do want to address more of your questions. I'm going to look into, because I'm kind of using Zoom a little bit, but I'd like to make this more of like a live stream where I can maybe share it on another platform like YouTube, or assuming I don't get kicked off, or Facebook, assuming I don't get kicked off. I think this is through Twitch, but maybe I can talk to one of the technology awesome people at One Great Work Network, the people that volunteer their time to help us with all of this technology. Maybe I can set up some time with one of those great folks to help me do that, so that if anybody wants to join me on one of these live streams and have a discussion about anything, ask a question, share information with me, or just, again, have a nice, beautiful discussion about truth, natural law, I would love to share my time with others. As long as you don't mind, showing your face and having people hear your voice. But if you don't want to and you'd rather email me a question, after this live stream is over and I have the recording available, I will be posting that under my personal page on the One Great Work Network. It's under my name, and you will also, that will be like a link to the Odyssey video. Usually I put Odyssey there, and then also the YouTube, assuming that I still have a channel. All right, so I have a few minutes left. Any last minute things I want to talk about? Let's see. I don't know where my dogs are. My cat is there. You probably can't see my kitty cat. It's out of the frame. All my dogs went upstairs. They're looking for their dinner. I will have to feed them soon. But I want to thank you all for those of you that have joined me on this live stream. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope it's inspired you to perhaps take a different look at how to approach health, and not be afraid of eating in a manner that seems weird, right? Just, eating nothing but fruit. Many people think, oh, that's so weird. And is it healthy? If you talk to a normie, they're going to tell you, you can't live on just grapes. That's craziness. And yet many people do it. And I'm not saying like your whole life you're eating nothing but grapes. All I'm saying is that if you're going through an experience of ill health, give your body the benefit of not having the energetic resources of your body's healing potential stolen by eating a shitty diet, by eating hard to break down, hard to process, hard to catabolize foods. When you free up that energy where you don't have to break down processed foods, and you're not using all of your own enzymes to break them down, because raw fruits and vegetables come with their own enzymes, so they help to break themselves down, which also takes the load off of us. That's another benefit of eating foods in their raw state. And all of that vitality you retain and you use, right? So it does pay off. It's like, many men, if they're going through a spiritual experience, they won't do things like masturbate because they're retaining that energy for themselves and that spiritual enlightenment. I don't know a lot about that. I'm just saying it's kind of analogous to that, I suppose. All right, it's about 7 p.m., so I'm going to tie it up here. Thank you all so much. I will see you next week, and let's go ahead and just get old Mr. Gates back up on the screen.